So, Nike, for example, there may be a Nike factory in China manufacturing shoes that they export to the United States. That then counts as part of our trade deficit. So we're actually importing products from an American company, but they're coming from China. This adds to our trade deficit. And when we put the tariffs do not discriminate between country of origin of the company that made the product. Tariffs are only against a particular country's exports. So if an export comes from China, it doesn't matter if it was made by a Dutch company, an American company, or German company, they're hit with the same tariff.
That's it for tonight. Thanks so much for watching this episode. If you enjoy the content, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below.
Here's Margot Robbie in a bubble bath to explain.
Basically,
Washington's top diplomat in Taipei said on Friday the U.S. is committed to bolstering Taiwan's ability to defend itself. Sandra Utkirk, who heads the de facto U.S. embassy in Taiwan, said that in the first news briefing since she took her post in July.
So the United States has a commitment to help Taiwan provide for itself self-defense. And that's part of the Taiwan Relations Act. It's a commitment we take very seriously. Our commitment to Taiwan is rock solid and contributes to the maintenance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and within the region.
Tense cross-strait tensions and the surge of Chinese military jets into Taiwan's air defense zone set off alarms that Beijing could try bolder moves to bring in what it views as a rogue province under its control. Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged peaceful reunification in a key speech on October 8th, but did not rule out military options. Washington has long followed a policy of strategic ambiguity on the question of military intervention in the event of a Chinese attack, but there have been clearer signs of U.S.-Taiwan relations warming. Utkirk's remarks came after Taiwanese leader Tsai Ing-wen told CNN that a small team of U.S. soldiers are on the democratically ruled island to provide support and training to local troops. While the United States, like most countries, has no formal ties with the Chinese-claimed island, it is its most important international backer and main arms supplier. President Joe Biden's administration has moved to restate that support, to the anger of Beijing.
if it is attacked by China. The White House later walked back those remarks, but now Taiwan's president tells CNN she is confident the U.S. would step up if Beijing tried to make a move on the democratic island. Those comments coming from the president's first international TV interview in nearly 2 years, where she also tells our Will Ripley the threat from China is increasing every single day.
At this temple in Taipei, prayer and politics go hand in hand for Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen.
Normally, when I go to the temple, there are hundreds of people there. I will shake hands with each one of them.
People are remarkably happy, at ease.
You have to give them a sense that there's somebody there to take care of them.
Elected in 2016, Tsai won re-election by a landslide last year on a promise to keep people safe from what she calls a growing threat across the Taiwan Strait. Is Taiwan more safe today than it was when you became president in 2016?
If it's a threat from China, it's increasing every day.
The mainland's massive military, 2 million strong, more powerful than ever. China flew 150 warplanes near Taiwan in just 5 days this month. This democracy of more than 23 million, governed separately from the mainland for more than 70 years since the end of China's civil war, still seen as a breakaway province in the eyes of Beijing's communist rulers, who have never controlled the island. China has pressured most of the world to sever formal diplomatic ties with Taipei. Chinese President Xi Jinping says reunification is only a matter of time. Are you interested in speaking with President Xi? Would you like to have more communication with him?
Well, more communication would be helpful so that we would reduce misunderstanding, given our differences in terms of our political systems. We can sit down and talk about our differences and try to make arrangements so that we would be able to coexist peacefully.
Your predecessor, as you know, did meet with President Xi. Why do you think that the communication has really gone south since 2016?
Well, I think the situation has changed a lot, and China's plan towards the region is very different.
That plan includes war threats over Taiwan, clashes with Japan in the East China Sea, and militarizing man-made islands in the South China Sea, posing a direct challenge to 7 decades of U.S. military supremacy in the Indo-Pacific. In response, the U.S. ramped up arms sales to Taiwan, selling the island $5 billion in weapons last year. President Tsai confirms exclusively to CNN U.S. support goes beyond selling weapons. Does that support include sending some U.S. service members to help train Taiwanese troops?
Well, yes. We have a wide range of cooperation with the U.S. Aiming at increasing our defense capability.
How many U.S. service members are deployed in Taiwan right now?
Not as many as people thought.
Defense Department records show the number of U.S. troops in Taiwan increased from 10 in 2018 to 32 earlier this year. The State Department asked for more Marines to safeguard the unofficial U.S. embassy in Taipei. Any U.S. military presence in Taiwan, big or small, is perceived by Beijing as an act of aggression, state media says. When reports surfaced earlier this month of U.S. Marines training Taiwanese troops, China released this video, a training exercise targeting Taiwan independence and interference by external forces like the U.S. A warning for President Joe Biden, who vowed to defend Taiwan at this CNN town hall last week.
So are you saying that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked?
Yes, we have a commitment to do that.
The White House later walked back Biden's comments. They seemed to contradict the long-standing U.S. policy of strategic ambiguity, leaving U.S. military involvement in Taiwan an open question.
People have different interpretation of what President Biden has said.
Do you have faith that the United States would defend Taiwan if the mainland were to try to move on Taiwan?
I do have faith, and given the long-term relationship that we have with the U.S. and also the support of the people of the U.S. as well as the Congress, and the administration has been very helpful.
Taiwan's defense minister says China could launch a full-scale war by 2025. He says military tensions are the worst in more than 40 years.
We have to expedite our military reform so that we have the ability to defend ourselves. And given the size of Taiwan compared to the size of the PRC, developing asymmetric capability is the key for us.
How prepared is Taiwan today?
We are trying to make us stronger in every aspect, and that includes our military capability and our international support.
Support bolstered, she says, by Taiwan's critical importance to the global supply chain. The island is a world leader in semiconductors. Taiwan was Asia's fastest growing economy last year, a fact President Tsai proudly points out over lunch.
This is one of my favorite foods.
All right. Despite everything, she appears calm and confident.
You talked about how really the situation is so complex now.
Yeah, it is very complex. This is probably the most challenging time for people of Taiwan.
You read the outside headlines, the most dangerous place on earth.
We read these reports as a reminder to us as to what sort of the threats that we're under, and we have to get ourselves better prepared. But we're not panicked, we're not anxious because we have gone through so many difficulties in the past.
She says Taiwan's future must be decided by its people, the people who've worked hard over the last 70 years to build the world's only Chinese-speaking democracy, a democracy under growing threat. This is the first time in more than 40 years that a Taiwanese president has publicly confirmed U.S. troops are here on the island training Taiwanese troops. And it comes at a time that the U.S. is calling for a more meaningful role for Taiwan at the United Nations, much to the ire of Beijing, which just yesterday said it is not ruling out the use of force to reunify with this island at any cost. Jake?
CNN's Will Ripley with that exclusive interview. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We're giving away this coin and it's making liberals absolutely furious. This is the limited edition Second Amendment is.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the weekly report. Will Biden start nuclear war?
statewide.
Not your regular pro game of StarCraft 2. Well, we've got one human in this match. Spawning here in the bottom right-hand corner of Catalyst, we have
totoo naman, tanungin yung mga adik, Ganait ba yan? Ha? Ganait, legendary ba to sa liga? Talaga ba? Eh wala kang ambag, mahina, di ka na kailangan. Marami na magagaling dito sa Manila. Di ka big fish, pinakamaliit ka lang na isda, ikaw ay pandaka pigmiya. Oh, ano? Hindi nyo alam, Google nyo yan.
A fake stomach ache, a single visit to China in the 70s, a backfired plan to liberate China. As we hit rock bottom with China in a Cold War 2.0 today, the attention is on Taiwan rejoining the United Nations and how both China and the US have different plans for the island. Behind all that is a fight in the ring to see who dominates the global order of all things. Plus, have you wondered what's like for a foreign business to run in China? How uneven is the playing field for foreign companies? Today, I got insight from an economics professor, Dr. Antonio Graceffo, who spent a good amount of time President Biden made a shocking statement on defending Taiwan. His team immediately responded saying nothing changed. But is it really true? This comes as Europeans clear up their own agreement with Taiwan, upgrading the EU's relationship with the island. Is someone finally stepping up to the bully, the Chinese regime? I'll explain. Plus, I got the chance to talk to the president of an oil and gas association who dedicates his time to defending the industry. While the administration pushes for green energy, our prices of oil and groceries jacked up almost double. Is there a connection? Coming up. Bullying is a problem in school. The bully preys on the weak kids, and they tell you to stop bullying, use a collective effort to condemn their actions, or simply stop giving them the audience. When NBA star Enes Kanter spoke out against the issues of Tibet and Xinjiang, he took a stance to defend against the bully, that is the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. But for a bully to succeed, they have accomplices, those that are bystanders who do not speak up, who encourages the behaviors of the bully. But when the bystanders become the defender, that is when the bully lose their power. When the world sees the CCP bully Taiwan, the democratic version of China, will the world stand up for it? It seems that way. Last week, the European Parliament passed their first ever EU-Taiwan Political Relations and Cooperation Report, with an overwhelming majority of 580 votes in favor. This is an upgrade of the EU-Taiwan relationship, and there are two major focuses. The first is the changing of the name of the EU office in Taiwan, and the second is the launching of the EU-Taiwan Investment Agreement. In the past, the name of the EU office in Taiwan was the European Economic and Trade Office, or EETO, in Taipei. That's the capital of Taiwan. But now, the name has been changed to simply EU Office in Taiwan, which means that the relationship between the EU and Taiwan has been upgraded on two levels. One is the official use of the name Taiwan instead of Taipei. Objectively, it's treating Taiwan as a relatively independent political entity, potentially as a country. But that is to be seen. As we know, Taipei is the capital city of Taiwan. It is used previously as it's a representative office, almost of a province of China. So upgrading the wording to Taiwan now indicates the clear understanding that Taiwan is not a part of China. And the other level up is the removal of the word economic and trade, which means that, at least in theory, the EU can develop relations with Taiwan in all areas other than just economic and trade. Could it be even more military cooperations or perhaps arms sales? This name change is a strong support to the previous Lithuanian representative office in Taiwan and is a slap to the face for the official position of the Chinese Communist Party, which again states the One China policy. What happened with Lithuania was that they were the first defender to stand up against the Communist Party. Like Enes Kanter, they stood up against China, and it looked for the rest to follow, especially in Europe. Lithuania, despite pressure from China, all it took was to stand up against a bully is just one person to come forward. Just a few months ago, the European Union stopped their EU-China investment agreement, and that was over the issues of human rights in China. Now, EU officials being sanctioned by Beijing also again contributed to it. But this new agreement, the EU-Taiwan Investment Agreement, is clearly in contrast to the indefinite freeze of the China-EU investment. That further indicates a shift in which China, the rest of the world, wants to work with. Whether you call it a Cold War or competition or what else, you can't deny the fact that the tension between the world and China is rising. And it's almost historical, considering we had the exact same thing just 50 years ago. The Soviet transformation, as some are calling it. This is both an ideological change and a physical change. We're seeing from China of this. They're definitely becoming the new Soviet, or a techno-Soviet overlord. As Chinese leader Xi Jinping said, rising east and falling west. But it seems now it's more of a rising south, Taiwan, and a falling out of favor north, the mainland China. Now this of course made the Chinese Communist Party furious. But before the CCP had a chance to think about how to retaliate, a big story broke in the United States. When President Biden was on the CNN town hall recently, he was asked by a student about defending Taiwan. He said this, watch.
China just tested a hypersonic missile. What will you do to keep up with them militarily, and can you vow to protect Taiwan?
Yes and yes. We are militarily, China, Russia, and the rest of the world knows we have the most powerful military in the history of the world. Don't worry about whether they're going to be more powerful. What you do have to worry about is whether or not they're going to engage in activities that will put them in a position where they may make a serious mistake. And so I've spoken and spent more time with Xi Jinping than any other world leader has.
So are you saying that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked?
Yes, we have a commitment to do that.
Now, of course, the White House immediately responded by saying that the U.S. had not changed its policy toward Taiwan. Biden did not announce any changes either. The U.S.-Taiwan defense relationship is still guided by the Taiwan Relations Act and blah, blah, blah. But still, Biden's very clear statement immediately became the focus of media coverage. And it was the second clearer statement that Biden would defend Taiwan. Of course, the first being the implicit statement in an August 18th interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos. And it drew great attention from experts on China.
If you could cancel your cable and streaming services, but still watch all your favorite channels, would you do it? This new groundbreaking discovery gives you access to your favorite channels and movies for free. And greedy cable companies.
Biden makes this commitment on Taiwan, but all jokes aside, could this be a Freudian slip from Biden? You know, when Biden answered the question not once but twice with a very affirmative manner, when the student asked about Taiwan, Biden answered with this, yes and yes, with little hesitation. Let me just run the clip one more time for you to see.
And can you vow to protect Taiwan?
Yes and yes.
Now, I know many of us watching do not really like Biden, but credit is due where whoever does the best thing. The U.S. under President Trump, we know, moved the country onto the opposition of communism, and that's a great thing. And competition with China only got more fierce under President Trump. And the Trump administration started to move this Taiwan question into the clear end of this vast space of what is called strategic ambiguity. That's the idea that we must remain unclear of what the intentions are for Taiwan, and whether or not we will come to their defense should China invade. Now, the reason why we had strategic ambiguity is to ensure no unreasonable escalations take place. And it's been the U.S. foreign policy for decades, including during the Gulf War in Iraq in the 90s and during the early days of the Korean War. Now, of course, President Biden at first was very unclear about what he wants for the administration's policies for Taiwan. But now, as we've seen, it's a clear continuation of the same Trump-era policy, as well as some of the big picture in Asia. And although there are small adjustments, of course, that are happening, such as the clear message of them wanting to compete with China. Now, rather than outright domination, as the Trump administration wanted to approach it, with Biden, it was more of a matter of slicing salami. Slice by slice, they moved to clear up their position on Taiwan. So this is a big change, but a clear change in the Biden administration. And this change is synchronized with the Chinese Communist Party's threat of using force in the Taiwan Strait. So let's briefly talk about this idea of strategic ambiguity. And many argue that the ambiguity, what really is essentially a spectrum of unclear, 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 until when it gets to the very top and it becomes so clear. And this has all but to do with the Chinese aggression. So what we mean by this dynamically maintaining the status quo idea or keeping ambiguity is as long as the CCP's threat keeps increasing, the United States must increase its own clarity. It cannot just maintain more ambiguity. It can only do less. And perhaps the CCP wants to test where exactly does the United States bottom line stands, and or how exactly determined is Biden to act on his verbal promises. But the fact that Biden has repeatedly and publicly made such statement in itself is a sign that the United States is making a significant adjustment to the ambiguous strategy of the past. And the White House is pulling back, of course, after Biden made those statements to move things forward. That's just sort of the bureaucracy at work. And this, again, a double act in my view. And the president will say something seemingly outrageous. his team would always pull him back a little bit. And here we have to also discuss what Biden's personal feelings are toward Taiwan, and this could be that possibility that Biden personally feels Taiwan is important. And if he had all the power as president, he would probably defend Taiwan. But because we're also bound by the legislation such as the Taiwan Relations Act, which again, it's abiding the one China policy, but there's no official document to counteract that, and that would say the president of the United States is for sure going to come to Taiwan's defense. Nobody really knows. Now that's leading me to this following question here. What does Congress want to do, and what is their role in this? Of course, some congressmen have been pushing for the legislative reforms on the Taiwan issue in terms of the combating of the Chinese aggression, but in part of reforming that Taiwan Relations Act, what could we do there? Many are still trying to seek for the sake of maintaining the status quo, but others are already saying we should declare that Taiwan is defended by the United States. And really, if we think about this, it's a bipartisan issue, including, for example, a recent suggestion made by Democrat Congresswoman Elaine Luria, who calls for Biden to have more power through a congressional legislation to defend Taiwan. And in that case, Biden could have more power to move the troops there. All in all, though, the two news items yesterday show that Europe and the United States are taking concerted actions that are reflecting on the Taiwan issue. And we might even guess that Biden really didn't want to fight this alone. So he called for his European friends to come to help. It's not a secret that everything is getting more expensive in this country. And the White House says their new spending bills will cost $0. Now, whether we believe that or not, the objective fact is that gas prices are through the roof. Groceries cost way more than before, and it's indicated that heating this winter will be way more expensive. The DEPA is a nationwide collaboration of 39 coalition associations from California to West Virginia, Texas to Montana, representing individuals and companies engaged in domestic onshore oil and gas exploration and production. I'm joined today by Jerry Simmons, the president of the DEPA, to find out how the U.S. oil and gas industry is suffering under a shifting energy policy from the administration and why prices of everything seem to increase. Jerry Simmons, pleasure of having you on.
I'm happy to be here.
Now, everything seems more expensive, stored goods, gas prices. Your organization, of course, works with oil and gas producers and the energy sector in the United States. What's been your experience with the situation right now?
You know, from our point of view, this country, America, had become energy self-sufficient last year for the first time in decades. I believe I saw a chart today where gasoline prices in the U.S. had gone from just under $2 a gallon to over $4 a gallon in the last year. Well, actually, since January of this year. So in 10 months, we've almost doubled the price. And, that hits the consumer. It's a message we've had here in Washington, D.C. That's, by the way, I'm in a hotel room talking to you from Washington, D.C. today. And we've been trying to carry that message to members of Congress for about a year now, is that when you increase energy prices, when you increase taxes on energy, it's the poorest among us and our friends in minority communities around this country that get hit first and hardest because a bigger percentage of their income goes to pay energy bills. And it's just a terrible situation. The Energy Information Administration has a couple of statistics that from 2015, they did a survey across America, and they found that 25 million U.S. households claimed that they had gone without food or medicine to pay for energy. 12 million American families said that they've kept their homes at unhealthy temperatures because they can't afford the bills. That's, whether it's heating or cooling. Those are terrible things to happen in this country. And I think there's a huge portion of this country, the folks that live here, that don't have a clue that that's going on. They don't know that their neighbors are suffering.
Now, so then from last year's situation to this year, what changed?
what happened then this year with the results of the election and a new administration on the first day, President Biden killed the Keystone pipeline contract. He put a halt, a moratorium on federal government leases. The federal government in this country owns about 30% of the mineral estate. The rest of that is owned by private individuals, and the government can't stop them from developing those properties. But there's still a lot of production, especially in the western U.S., that's on federal lands, and he stopped that. Regulatory-wise, they started rolling back regulations that had been approved by the previous administration that increased our costs. They encouraged banking to not lend to oil and gas and fossil fuels, so coal companies as well. So our access to capital dried up this year.
So from these two answers, it seems that we have an abundant amount of resources and ways to extract them, but we're limited by some sort of policy that we're just not allowed to take advantage of those resources and actually use them. Is that the case?
Absolutely. The current policies of not, again, cutting off funding for us to be able to produce the oil and gas we have in this country is a big problem. The idea that you have a federal government that has said it wants to do away with oil, gas, and coal by 2050, that makes it very hard for people to think about it as a future resource. Where at the same time, the Energy Information Administration just issued a report where they said currently, worldwide, fossil fuels provide between 80 and 85% of all the energy consumed. And by 2050, that projection is still at 70+%. So, oil, gas, and coal aren't going to go away anytime soon. The resource that we have in natural gas and over the last decade has reduced the amount of CO2 that this country puts into the atmosphere more than any other country on the planet. And that's a result of changing out coal plants with natural gas plants. And another part of this problem that the Biden administration has done since January is re-entering the Paris agreements, the Paris Accords. And by that, it puts restrictions on this country and what we can do. And that's, again, part of the current reconciliation discussion going on with Congress and having this power plan that they want to put in. And that's to meet restrictions put on us by that Paris Accord, where if you take the Chinese government, for example, in that same Paris Accord, they don't have to do anything until 2030. And then at 2030, they kind of have to report what they're doing. And so a country that installed, I think my number is right, 200 coal-fired power plants in 2020,